Alright, so the big topic of today is whether or not the states can refuse entry of immigrants from Syria. During this video, you might hear my dog bark because I'm outside, and you might hear the wind pick up, so do forgive me if that happens. It's kind of windy this evening. The big headline is more than a half of the nation's governors are going to refuse the refugees. Break it down to a map, it looks like this. Orange being the states that are going to refuse entry. The green, of course, will take them. Yellow is taking, but wants to increase screening. And the gray has no statement. South Dakota, Kentucky, and West Virginia. Likely to go orange, I would assume. So does the president have the power to order these immigrants in? In the Constitution, the president has a lot of powers when it comes to foreign affairs. But usually those are things like appointing ambassadors, other officials, and dealing, basically with an executive from the other nation and making executive agreements. So let's look and see what an executive agreement might entail. Okay, it says here from my handy constitutional law notes from law school, the president has the authority to negotiate and sign agreements that are effective upon signing by the president at the head of a foreign leader. The problem is, do refugees have a foreign leader? That's a question that I think one can come up with several answers to. What country are they in? Because if they've already left their country of their home country, then they're not in that country anymore, so they don't have a leader in whatever country. It's just very convoluted at that point. But anyway, so as far as executive agreements, where do they stand in relation to other laws? Well, treaties and executive agreements prevail over conflicting state laws. So state laws, there you kind of say right there, if they use an executive agreement, which I don't see how they can, it would conflict over the government's various governors' wishes of the various states. But if they conflict with a federal statute, if it's a treaty, the one adopted later in time, of course, would prevail. But an executive agreement will fail to a federal statute, no matter when the federal statute was enacted. And, of course, if they are in violation of the Constitution, both will fail. There's not going to be a treaty. I doubt there'll be an executive agreement. So we got to figure out what is it going to be. Most likely it'll be an executive order. And is it a time of emergency? I don't know. The whole thing about executive orders is very controversial as well. There's been all kinds of fights about it. But if they make the executive order that says that the states have to take them, of course, that we touched on earlier, but the Supremacy Clause would order the states to take them because any state law in violation of a federal law, of course, the federal law controls. So, what can the states do? Back in the olden days, Kentucky and Virginia had some problems where they thought some laws being passed or potentially could be passed would be unconstitutional. They came up with resolutions that stated that if a law is viewed by that state as unconstitutional, it does not have to be enforced. So that federal law would be invalidated at that state. That wasn't very successful. None of the other states really approved it. So that's probably not going to be something they can use. So with executive orders, like I say, there's been a lot of controversy with it. They're overturned sometimes by courts. Congress has an ability to overturn them with a supermajority, but that's unlikely with our current Congress. Everything seems to get approved or just far less than a supermajority. So we have to see now the only real point of action that can be taken would be in the court system. If we look on Google, the first taps I made was executive order found unconstitutional, and we find these court rulings. So going through the courts is definitely the way to go if the state governments want to be able to stop this influx of Syrian refugees. It's time and time again, executive orders are found in abuse, basically, of the executive powers. We had that case. This one, I think, was from 2014. This is a recent one from the Fifth Circuit that's probably going up to the Supreme Court because the DOJ said that they would bring it up to the Supreme Court. And this other one was from last year, and it also found the immigration action unconstitutional. So the states would probably have to seek an injunction and stop the ordering the states to take the immigrants into the court system would take it from there. That's usually a pretty long battle. So by the time that the crisis in Syria is over, it may be already over by the time it goes through the courts, so who knows. And everybody has an opinion on what's what. I'm just breaking down the areas of law and how that the state governors what they can use to actually be successful in their refusal to accept the Syrian refugees. Other than that, I'll leave you the whole page under this video to opine as you will. And have a good day.